Hello and welcome to Brodual. Today we have an interesting mod by the name of Spell Research. This is a mod that adds an entirely unique spellcrafting system to Skyrim. Through several new forms of spell research, you'll learn how to manipulate your own unique flow of magicka to compose entirely new spells. The ultimate aim of the mod is to make it feel like you've worked towards and deserve to be a master of magic, to truly earn a place amongst legends. Compared to vanilla, the mod offers a much more complex system, and its long description on the mod page might scare you off. But once you have a grasp of things, it makes for an incredibly immersive and satisfying way to play as a mage. But before we get into the mod, we'd like to thank the Amino app for sponsoring this episode. Amino is an app where millions of different communities can unite around their passions, fandoms and interests. And one such community is for the Elder Scrolls. Here you'll be able to voice chat or text with thousands of other like-minded individuals. One thing I like to do in particular is check out the new fan art that gets posted daily, especially when it revolves around a character and comes with a bit of a story. So if you're stuck thinking of a new character for a playthrough, Amino is a great place to get new ideas. On top of that, you can take part in events like quizzes or competitions. We've also put up a poll to see what our next Transforming Skyrim video should be. So to check out the Elder Scrolls Amino and vote on our poll, or to join one of the millions of other communities, you can find a link for the app down below. Or instead, you can search for Amino on your app store. You can find us on there under the name Brodual, so be sure to add us once you get on. Jumping back into the spell research mod, the first thing you'll want to do is to remove spell tomes from the loot and level lists. And for that you'll need a separate smaller mod that does just that. This gets rid of the idea that spells are just simple tricks that you can learn by consuming a new spell tome. If you want to learn a new spell, you'll have to invoke it yourself. This is done by taking the knowledge you'll obtain through research and then using that to compose a new spell. Spells are now broken down into dozens of new archetypes. These archetypes are the elements and techniques you'll need to understand in order to cast spells. At first it might seem a bit complicated, but it's actually fairly intuitive. For example, the Flame spell comes with the archetypes Fire, Destruction, Aimed and Concentration, whereas Healing has the archetypes Restoration, Health, Self-Targeting and Curing. These archetypes are essentially a new form of magical experience obtained through research, that you'll eventually mix and match to learn new spells. This is where the mod's strength truly lies. As an example, let's say you wanted to play as a Pyromancer. In vanilla, you unlock a few perks and buy a few spell tomes, and then boom, you're a Pyromancer without ever having to cast a fire spell. Whereas with spell research, using and studying fire is the only way to learn new fire spells. You'll literally build your own affinity for fire and grow as a Pyromancer as you play. Generally speaking, you can break spell research down into three paths: the Scholar, the Alchemist and the Adventurer. As the most basic of the three, the Scholar is essentially the default method for research. To get started, you'll want to craft your own research journal, which can be made at a tanning rack. Then you'll need some extra supplies, including a quill, some ink and some rolls of paper. The Scholar path involves using the research journal to study the spells you already know, breaking it down to learn more about its archetypes, which you can then put towards learning other similar spells. By equipping a spell you know in your right hand and then selecting begin research in your journal, you'll spend a few hours as well as your mental energy to study the spell. Your mental energy and capacity for learning depends on your max magicka, so a novice magician can only spend a few hours before being too exhausted to continue. Pretty much every aspect of researching will drain your max magicka, so to carry on with your research you'll have to get some well-earned rest. You can check your current archetype experience at any time in the mod menu, where you'll also see how your knowledge breaks down at each level. So studying a novice spell will mostly grant novice level experience, but also a little in the higher tiers too. Once you're confident with your archetype levels, you can begin the process to invoke a new spell. First you need to compose your magical thesis. These basically act as a recipe for the type of spell you're trying to create. You can create a thesis of any complexity in any of the archetypes you know, so even a total novice can create a master level thesis if they wanted to. Once you have the relevant thesis, you can attempt to compose a spell. This is a process that involves a bit of common sense, your knowledge of other spells in the game, and also a bit of trial and error. Again, it may seem complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. You just need to combine different archetypes into what you think ends up in a new spell. So let's say you combine the archetypes Fire, Destruction and Area of Effect. You might end up with something like the Fireball spell. The mod fully supports the major spell mods out there, including Apocalypse and Fendrix's Magic Evolved, and we highly recommend that you have at least one major spell mod installed. The more spells you have available, the less specific you have to be in your thesis, and the more surprising the result. The chance of successfully composing a new spell depends on your magical skill level, your mental energy, and your experience in those archetypes. Also, the more thesis you put into the crafting of the spell, the more likely you are to succeed. As a scholar, you'll now also have the ability to craft your own tomes or scrolls. On top of mentally exhausting you, this also requires some extra paper and ink to complete. The tomes offer a new way to earn a bit of extra gold or to give to a follower, while the scrolls might also come in handy for when you're too mentally exhausted to cast your own spells. And of course, both of these give experience in the relevant archetypes. The second path you can take is the Alchemist. This is a much faster method compared to the Scholar, but as you'd expect, it requires a ton of extra materials. So if you've yet to start your own garden, now's the perfect time to start. Using a new alembic and cauldron, you can now break down your ingredients to produce all sorts of bizarre liquids. An alembic is a field tool designed to break down a few ingredients at a time, handy for gaining that extra bit of knowledge you might need while travelling. A cauldron, however, is a new piece of furniture that you need to place down to use. This can break down a ton of ingredients at once, but you'll also need to supply it with fuel. Once you've broken down your ingredients, you'll have a bunch of bizarre liquids, for which you have two options. You can choose to analyse the liquids to receive knowledge in a variety of magical archetypes, including those that you don't already know. Or instead, you can continue down the path of alchemy by mixing the liquids together to create new elixirs. These can then be combined with other ingredients to create all sorts of potions and poisons. It can take a bit of trial and error to find the right combination of ingredients, but if you do, you can use that knowledge to essentially mass produce powerful potions. Finally, the last path is the Adventurer. For a more exploration based option, the Adventurer path offers by far the least grindy choice of the three. As you explore Skyrim, you'll discover all sorts of new rare magical relics. These relics can come in the form of artifacts, ancient texts, or grimoires. Depending on the item and how you interact with it, you can gain a fairly large amount of knowledge in all sorts of archetypes. However, these relics are often fragile and even dangerous, and how you interact with them determines the end result. Artifacts are the simplest of the three. You can study them slowly over time, or smash them to gain some immediate experience. You can even just throw them into your cauldron to see what comes out. Certain vanilla questing items might also be artifacts. Another relic type is ancient texts. These are incredibly fragile objects written in ancient languages, but they contain all sorts of magical secrets. You can attempt to translate the text yourself, but every turn of its pages could spontaneously destroy it, especially if you're a heavy-handed beginner mage. Instead, keep an eye out for translation tomes from merchants and in loot. And finally, grimoires are the rarest of them all. Usually made by insane mages, they're overflowing with magical energy. These contain a huge amount of knowledge on magical archetypes, and potentially even entire spell compositions. However, they're incredibly volatile. Every touch could cause it to spontaneously explode, destroying itself and harming you. Or even worse, some have the potential to steal your own magic. Altogether, the three paths offer a ton of new and fun ways to unlock magical archetypes, which you can then put into creating new spells. As I said, the mod is fully compatible alongside other spell mods, and it works alongside other major alchemy and perk overhauls too. Overall, spell research will dramatically change the way you play and grow as a mage, not only through its unique archetypal crafting system, but with its dozens of complementing features. From the new scroll crafting to the Victorian era-esque alchemy system to the endless treasure hunting. If you're looking for a way to truly mix up how magic works in Skyrim, then we highly recommend you give it a go. We'll include everything you need in the description below, and as always, be sure to leave endorsement on any mod you enjoy, and thanks for watching.